Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Parent Heroes Podcast. My name is Zach, your host, and on this show, we aim to provide some inspiration out there to parents raising the next generation. You know, we've got guests that are educators, we've got guests that are parents out there doing amazing things, and I am really excited about our guest today. What's so cool about the way this works is every time I have a guest, I ask them, who in your world would you recommend to come on? And how funny was it to me when the last person I asked to be, or was invited on the show, said, you know who you gotta meet is Sam Young. Now, Sam Young is someone I met through Kate a while back. This guy's got a big smile like me. He's got big energy. He's doing amazing things in the education space. And he runs a really cool program called the Young Scholars Academy that's all about leading a strength-based revolution. And he's working with exceptional students, twice-baked exceptional students, as I call it. He's got his own phrasing for it. So I really want to bring on this guest. You're going to learn a ton from him. You're going to get some inspiration. And hopefully my goal for this is you take away some inspiration and some ideas that you could bring to your home and your family. So without further ado, Sam Young, get up here, man. How's it going, brother?
Zach, thanks so much for having me. And I do remember I was cracking up with that email. I thought when someone introduced us, your past guest introduced us, I was like, oh, I already know this guy and I'm excited to talk to him. So I'm really happy to have some time with you today.
I love it. It means we're both doing something right in this world when we start circling back again. You know, that's a good
I love that.
Things.
Absolutely.
Well,
absolutely.
Look, man, tell us a little bit about the Young Scholars Academy. It's a really interesting program. Like, what is it? What's the kind of short pitch? What's the long pitch? Who are you helping? How are you helping them? Run us through it all, man.
So the idea behind Young Scholars Academy is that essentially it exists to be a virtual village of strength-based learning. Right? We call ourselves a virtual village because it's a place where people who are maybe looking for community, who are maybe struggling to connect, maybe having a difficult go of it in other places, can come together, can instead focus on their strengths, the things that they're really good at, the things that they're curious about, the things they're excited at, and they can develop them with like-minded peers and under the loving tutelage, under the care of basically grown-up versions of them. So what that looks like is strength-based enrichment courses and stuff that's radically accelerated that usually can't be found for our kids' ages, and doing it with really cool kids who are like them, who kind of become built-in friends.
Well, tell us a little bit more about that. Who are these students that you're serving, and how would you explain a little bit more like what it means to be exceptional? Or you use this phrase like twice exceptional, which I associate with a double-baked stuffed potato. So somehow in my mind, I started saying like twice baked. But tell us a little bit more about some of their qualities, some of the ages, like how are they self-identifying? How are parents identifying? What are some of the problems they're having in their traditional environments?
Yeah, so the twice exceptional refers to, and this goes back to my mentor, Dr. Susan Baum, was part of the original kind of cohort who first, came up with this phrase. But the idea is have dual exceptionalities. And for those of you that are watching, not listening, I'm helping you out. And for those of you that are just listening, I'll talk through it. But the idea is one of my hands is going up, the other hand's going down. And that refers to these spiky profiles that our kids have. On the one hand, the higher hand, they have these exceptional strengths. They might be physically really gifted, right? A gymnast or a jujitsu person, like Zach, right? Doing jujitsu at 5 a.m., right? Someone that has really high strengths. And then on the other hand, it's someone who, and this could be intellectual curiosity, creativity, drawing, just about anything, and often stuff that's not tapped in school. And then the other one is going to be a struggle area. Maybe a student is really gifted and autistic. They're really creative and have dyslexia or dysgraphia. So that kind of spiky profile of high highs and low lows, that's who we're serving, Zach. And before there was a term twice exceptional, they were called gifted and learning disabled or gifted and learning difference. And it's the idea that, if you picture a bell curve, people usually think someone's on one end or the other. They're either gifted or they have learning disabilities.
Yeah.
And as we get further and further into psychology and we learn more and more about the complexity of people, we realize that actually many people are in possession of both simultaneously, right? And we think about the thing that's really difficult is that life does not care about one's deficits, right? Like I gave the physical example, but like, I don't know about you, but I don't spend time thinking about Simone Biles' ability to do her taxes or plumbing or basic mathematics, right? But when I look at Simone on the gym mat, there's no doubt about it that this is the greatest gymnast I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But school trains its attention on what we're not doing, right? It would take Simone, who, by the way, is obviously a world-class gymnast and has ADHD, and would focus on helping, quote unquote, fix or correct her deficits. When you're in the Olympics, that stuff doesn't matter, right? So it seems like society kind of gets it more than school does. And so one of the reasons that Young Scholars Academy sort of conceived was to help students train their own attention on their strengths, because there's such a gap between the strengths and the struggles, and so much energy and time are spent on the struggles. We want to help kids come together, even for just an hour a day, and train their attention on their strengths. Because at the end of the day, these are the kids that are going to be leading the world, as you said in the beginning. These are the kids that are going to be, pioneering everything, running revolutions, starting companies, all that stuff. And when you're in that position, people just look to your strengths.
I love this, man. I got chills from you describing it. I could relate a lot personally, and I think that the direction we're going in this of focus on your strength, build your strengths. Obviously, we got to deal with our weaknesses, but over attention on that, often overemphasize it, then your Olympic level skills and interests, like, they get diminished. So I love this, and you explain it really well, by the way. So thank you for that. I want to ask you, the next part is like the classes and the instruction and the things that you're giving them. That short little intro was great, but it did not do justice to the real, like, swath of stuff you're offering. So talk to me a little bit about what these courses or programs, I forget the exact phrasing you used for it, what they look like, what they cover, and maybe are they slightly different than how content is taught or delivered in a traditional classroom?
Yeah, no, it's great questions. And I always try to start kind of high and then I get a little bit more granular. So
Cool.
kind of zooming in, what we have like three pillars that we call the 3 C's. So the three things that we know our kids need. Number one, they need radically accelerated, unique content. And when I talk about content, I'm going to zoom in on a college example in a moment. Number two, the second C is our community of like-minded kids.
Yeah.
A lot of the times these kids are struggling to socialize, and what's happening is they're comparing themselves to neurotypical peers who are different, right? And I'm going to give you an example in a moment. And then number three, the third one is these idea that we have caring mentors, grown-up versions of our kids. They can look and say, hey, kiddo, I've been there. I know it's tough. By the way, this tip got me through college. This tip helped me get my first job. This tip helped me realize I only need one friend, or whatever it is, right? So when we zoom into the first C, when we talk about content, right, I realized most of our kids struggle when they have to become like a jack of all trades, quote unquote, but they do fairly well in college because they get to go really deep in one area. And I further realized we don't need people to be a jack of all trades, right? We're, again, to go back to the Simone Biles example, you could drive it home until I'm
No
blue.
one's hiring for jack of all trades.
No,
typically.
I don't hire well-rounded. Well-rounded is not on my, when I'm hiring our different mentors, I'm not looking for well-rounded. I'm looking for like a fanatical expert who gets our kids, right? And that's what we want, right? So I thought, well, what's the difference if you put a kid in quote unquote like math 9, or you put them in like, theory and statistics of controversial mathematics? Like, which one's more engaging, right? And are we going to take history 101, or are we going to take like women in the Vietnam War, right? Which, right, like, it makes sense. So I had this aha, what if we just brought that down to 5-year-olds? Like, what if we just started for 5 to 18-year-olds, giving them like radically accelerated, quantum physics, advanced placement government courses. And so now it's grown. We have about, to answer your kind of more specific question, we have 50 classes. They meet about an hour a week, up to 40 weeks. And they offer that consistent community that ranges from things like executive function, AP calculus, quantum physics and conceptual science, to really social stuff, Dungeons and Dragons, Minecraft, Pokemon app creating, right? And then we have just social clubs. So you can imagine on that continuum from mock trial to government to, whatever it might be, there's different flavors for the kids, but they all go super deep in the content space.
Yeah.
And kind of pivoting over, we know that our kids get buried with work, right? You take kids, I've seen this before. I know you've seen it before, and I know parents who are listening have seen it. You have a really bright kid. They want to talk. They want to be a part of something big. They want to do something authentic. Don't give them too much homework because they get buried in the cycle, right? They get buried, very buried. It's bad. So what we know is these kids are so radically advanced, but then they have these lagging executive function struggles. And again, that spiky profile, high, high, and low, low, means that they're being asked to deliver more because they know more, and then they get buried more, and then they lose hope more, right? So what we've done is we've just scaled back all the production. Let's have high level Socratic seminars. Let's do the bare minimum in terms of production. Still get kids at a high level, but let's reason with them. Let's use rationale, not just busy worksheets.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what kills them.
God, it's so true, and I could speak as someone who taught AP and IB and saw the amount that we buried. I always tried to take an approach of like, let's do as much here as we can, but I really got to honor you and the people that are teaching, because to create that content and then deliver it is not easy. It's just as hard as, the not taking the easy route. So I love that you're doing that. And I want to encourage everybody. I'm going to say this many times today, so get ready. Go check out Young Scholars Academy. Go check out what Sam's doing. Get your kids in there. And man, there's so many directions I could go, but I want to stick to the next thing, which is the mentorship. You and I talk, we have a shared teaching background. We've both been in the classroom. I became a teacher largely because I remember thinking I could do this better. I wish, man, when I was a teenager, I wish I had the me now. I craved it. I could even form that kind of language. And I know you've had similar experiences. We're going to get into your background in a minute, but what's that mentorship part like? Like how are the students interacting with them? How are you finding them? What amazing things have you noticed from these type of and it's not a friendship, a mentorship. So maybe start with how you would define mentorship and then tell us a little bit about what that looks like in practice for you guys.
Yeah, and as I go to the mentor, I'm gonna kind of detour quickly through the community element, because this is really
Oh,
important.
cool. Yeah,
Right.
please.
So understanding our kids, I'm gonna give you a concrete example. We have a girl who's 12 years old now, and she has a 179 IQ, which is like considered to be profoundly gifted. To put that into perspective for those of you who haven't studied IQs and looked at because this is a jaw-dropping statistic. Albert Einstein was 165.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so we have a 12-year-old girl. Your average person's 100. If you're one standard deviation over, you're 115. If you're two standard deviations over, you're about 130. That puts you in the gifted category. It's controversial. Is it 125? Is it 135? But roughly we'll accept 130 to 140 and say gifted. This girl's 12. She's got a 179 IQ, 15 IQ points, roughly higher than Albert Einstein, who we might consider to be like one of the greatest intellects of the 20th century. And she's in a 12-year-old's body. So what do you do with a kid like that, right? Like her friends are, friends. Her typical neurotypical peers are going around and like, I don't know, playing Pokemon or touching grass or whatever kids do. And then she's like staying up all night because she realizes like global warming's happening and that her cousin's house might be underwater. Because what do you do when you have this like intellectual prowess, but the social emotional lacking maturity, right?
Yeah.
We can say
Yeah.
global warming's heavy, and so are these other things. And I have these things to be grateful for. But a kid with that spiky asynchrony can't do that. So that's where the mentors come in. It's when you have someone who can't really talk to kids their age because they need adults to help them intellectually, to help them process big feelings. And so what we found is I essentially hire people who are all word of mouth, to answer your question. Everybody that comes to me, I taught at a school, Zach, called Bridges Academy, which was the first twice exceptional school in the world. They've been around for like 23 years. The founders and people who are part of that program, Dr. Susan Baum and others, were like part of like the coinage of the term twice exceptional. And I taught there. And then I went up to they had a graduate school. So I researched there and studied there. And then eventually I left and started Young Scholars Academy. But I only took people from my graduate school at first. It was very close. I'm like, you get it. You're with me. You're same program. You've been indoctrinated, right? Like we're speaking the same language
Drinking the
inside the same
Kool-Aid,
bubble.
baby. Yes.
Exactly. We're drinking the same punch. So what we did was I started there, and then it just became word of mouth. Right. We'd have a parent who would say, Mike, you have to get this improv teacher. She changed my kid's life. And my autistic son is now socializing because of improv. Or we have a kid who really struggles to connect with others and is school avoidant, is playing Minecraft. You have to get this person. And so it just kind of word of mouth. We now have about 16 different mentors. But when I define mentor, what I'm essentially referring to is there's basically like a few criteria. One, they take a strength-based perspective. They're not interested in what kids aren't doing. They're focused on helping kids develop their strengths and talents. And they're doing it in a narrow field of their interest, right? These people are like resident experts, and they're looking past our kids' struggles and helping them cultivate their strengths, right? They're adults, they're mature enough, they're educated enough, they've gone through like a rigorous program that we have, and they're already recommended to us. So there's that element, right? The strength element, the talent development. The second one is they're usually like me. They're like the kids growing up, right? We can say, I've been there. Like I identify, I'm twice exceptional, right? I know what it is to struggle. I remember being in the reading class that was the lowest one, but then my teachers were telling me I should be in the highest one, but I couldn't keep up with the reading, right? You know, these profiles of, hey, I've been there and I know what it's like. And I'm going to give you like a really palatable example. We had a summer camp this past week, and it was a summer camp on executive function skills, helping kids learn the doing skills, right? The first day, a kid came in struggling. The teacher said, by the way, I can tell writing might be difficult for you, so I'm just going to show you all what I do. Screen share, show. By the way, when you're in a Google document, you can use voice to text. You go here, you drop down, you click this, look at my hands, voice to text. The kid was floored. The mom emailed that night and said, we could stop coming right now. We already got our money's worth. Because my son just learned how to write and he didn't change. He used his voice. And it's the little anecdotal stuff. Like I tell kids, I'm like, hey, I didn't read a book till I was 30. And by the way, I didn't change. I just got Audible. Right. Like it's just little
Whoa.
hacks like that, you know, little stuff that just comes up casually. Or one of our teachers, Amy, talking about how difficult it was socializing as an autistic ADHD person, and how she found success making friends by thinking about a certain ratio of how many times she asks about other people versus how many times she talks about herself. Little stuff like that is changing the trajectory of kids' lives. So when we talk about mentoring, it's their content experts,
Yeah.
and they're personal lived experts. They have the personal journey. And then typically some of our mentors also have this 1/3 element. It's not required, but many of them are actually parents of twice exceptional and gifted kids as well. And they will enroll their kids in our program if they're of age. So they've also not only been the journey, but they're also raising kids like the kids in our program.
Well, if you're not on his website yet, what's the URL again
It's youngscholarsacademy.org.
.org, right? So if you're not there yet, now you are, because this is amazing stuff. And I love that you talked about the mentorship in the community. We're going to come back to education and our thoughts on it in a little bit, but I cannot imagine a future of education that doesn't incorporate mentorship more deeply. I feel it's old school, it's new school, it's everything. But let's talk a little bit about you, brother man, and your journey. Like this is you've had an interesting road, and maybe you could talk a little bit about your experience, you know, kind of growing up in the education systems that you were in, how you ended up at the school that you were teaching, and then I want to get into how you launched Young Scholars Academy. But take us through your journey, brother. What was your kind of upbringing like? What were your strengths? What were your challenges, lessons learned, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I definitely struggled, and I'm going to share something that's deeply personal. I'm going to start with, it's actually not about me, but it's about my father who passed away this past year. And I realized in this space that my dad was a twice exceptional adult, which helped me later understand. And I say this, it's kind of a big share, but I think that largely he passed away because of executive function struggles, because he was dyslexic, he had ADHD, and he was born in 1947. So he lived in a time when people didn't really understand that stuff. So when he was young, every photograph, when I was going through his things, I went through his photos. I've never shared this, by the way. Every photo was someone was holding his hands by his side. And it was because he couldn't stop moving, right? So my dad, he became an artist, but they sent him to military school because he couldn't pay attention and he couldn't read very well.
Interesting.
And I realized after the fact, right? Things are usually clear in the rear view.
Yeah.
But when I was young, I was like that too. I obviously different era, but I had a hard time paying attention. My desk was always the one that was connected to the teacher's desk from second grade. Every year, they would slide me in there. I'd be at the vice principal's office. I just couldn't stop certain things, and I couldn't do others. I really had a hard time reading. Like I was, you know, I think we're the same era. I was, you know, phonics was all the rage, right? In the 90s, I was doing phonics and all of that stuff. And I could do it, but it just took a tremendous amount of energy that was really draining. So I literally never read a book all the way through school. I got really good at making my way through it. I could read the end of the chapter and kind of reverse engineer it, or I could like talk to someone who was a really good reader and kind of charm the answers out of them or whatever it might be. And it goes back to kindergarten. On the first day of kindergarten, my dad picked me up, and the teacher was Miss Allen, and she said, Mark, to my dad, I realize if I can get Sam to do something, I get the class to do it. Like your kid can get people to follow. And that was like the last time I got praise for school, because after kindergarten, the work ramps up, right? And then I started to struggle. And that's, the production demands, the executive function skills, the reading and processing. It got difficult. And I always felt really bad. And I would overcompensate with the work ethic. I would stay up all night. I didn't really socialize very much. I would just like will myself into reading, right? Or like eat enough snacks until I was like able to focus or whatever, and it was tough, right? So I did the like ADHD diagnosis and on and off meds my whole life. I always felt like it was like the Matrix. It's like, do you want the red pill or the blue pill? Like I would wake up and I'd be like, do I want to have a good day or do I want to focus? Right. I felt like I could never have it all. Like it's either I sacrifice my soul and personality, and it was really tough. Like it was a really difficult journey. And I had this moment, like in college, I had this roommate, and he was he became a psychologist, by the way. So he's really gifted at this. Across the quad, he sees me and he's like, "You took your meds today." And I was like, "What?" And I walked over and I was like, "How did you know that?" And he said, "You don't have a pep in your step. You're walking like a zombie, dude." And I went, "Wow." And I just kind of always struggled between like, do I want to be the person I am that has strengths that can be, personal and can communicate with other people, or do I want to be the person that can like pay attention and do my work? But I felt like I could never be both at once. And it was always a tough thing, right? It's hard to hold both or make those decisions when you're young.
Jeez, man, that's a powerful story, and I feel like this conversation is so important, especially for parents who have been through it or listening, and maybe you don't really get what your kid is going through. And I appreciate you, man. That's some pretty vulnerable share right there. So,
Yeah. And if,
um,
if I could throw one thing out there, there's kind of a climax in the story, which is that I got to ninth grade and I was in the lowest English class that you could take. And all my other classes were kind of spotty. I'd be in like advanced here or whatever, but it was about my interests, right? I was in like
yeah, yeah,
advanced automotive shop and then like advanced history and then the lowest English. Like if you looked at the top, it's like it's got a super spiky profile. I was doing like 2 PEs just so I could move, like all this stuff. And I'm like, what's going on here? And this guy, Mr. Dunphy, held me back on the first day. He's like, "Young, stay after class." I was like, "Oh man, I'm already in trouble," which I was used to in English class. And he's like, "What are you doing here, Young?" I said, "Well, I'm here to take your class, Mr. Dunphy." And he's like, "Well, you're wasting your time and mine too." It's like, "What do you mean?" I'm thinking this guy thinks I'm stupid.
yeah.
And he's like, "You're too damn smart to be in a basic English class." I was like, "Sir, I have a hard time reading. I have never been told that in an English class." And he's like, "Well, you should be in honors." And I thought, wow, and I stayed actually in that class. And it was the best decision I ever made because he was the best teacher I ever had. And I realized I wanted to be like him. I wanted to like demand more out of people,
Oh,
and so it was then I started like really, I think I was 12 or 13. I was like, I'm going to be a teacher. And then I went on and, long story short, became a teacher, went to school to be an educator. I was a history and debate teacher. And
cool.
then, the cool teacher.
Yeah, that's right, bro. That's
I'm
why we
kidding.
get on, the cool
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah. No. What did you teach, by the way?
I started off teaching history actually as well.
Mm,
And then I got in, was much more interested in like web development programming.
mm,
So I started teaching there, but you needed a degree. So I went to go get my CS degree, and I knew more than most of the teachers. So I started teaching at the university. I was getting my degree before I got it. Um, One thing you just gotta get, that was a
yeah.
big
Yeah.
non-linear path, but similar start off in history as well.
Yeah. I think that's a good point, by the way. It's never linear. And I think that, we put a lot of pressure on our kids to like figure it out.
Oh God, brother.
I always tell parents it's like the intersection of everything that you're going to do that you don't know yet. It's you end up at the place that's the corner of this and that, but it's never where you think it's going to be, right?
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of truth to that, man. So tell me about the school that you ended up. I don't want to get into too much depth, but I'm always interested in trying to share with parents some of what's out there because sometimes you just don't know. So how did you find out about, remind me the name of the school again?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's kind of it's Bridges Academy.
Bridges Academy. Okay.
Kind of a funny story. After college, I had a Fulbright scholarship where it was like 14 or 16 Americans went to France and studied the French education system. And then the French sent educators to America. We kind of traded spaces for a school year, basically. And I did this pedagogical exchange. And then I went to DC and the State Department and, presented our research. And my basic takeaway was, well, the French focus a lot on like rote memorization and things like that. They get like the self-actualization well. Like people take a tremendous amount of pride in developing their talents. In the United States, it's like you go for A and then you fall back on B, right? So many people might become a janitor or like a custodian, I guess, or in waste management or something like that. But it's not necessarily like their A plan. But in France, they have like phenomenal vocational schools. People take a tremendous amount of
Yeah,
pride.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
competitive, right? And you go and you're like, I am a server. Like I have a very healthy, comfortable salary, and there's this idea of like this like talent development and pride. And I thought that's magnificent. So fast forward, I'm teaching at different schools. I'm at a school actually for students. It's a project-based learning school for students who are in and out of juvie. It's like
Oh, yeah, yeah.
students who are really impacted, group homes. And I fly down to Los Angeles. I'm living in San Francisco, and I go to this school fair, like a hiring fair.
Oh,
And if you
cool. Yeah.
picture, there's a horseshoe of tables, all these tables, right? And everybody's going what you do, right? They go clockwise. They go to the left, and then they go right. I'm like, bunch of sheep, I'm gonna go right to left. So I go to the right hand side, and I talk to a bunch of people, and it's almost like speed dating. You're meeting principals.
Yeah.
If you like someone, they bring you back for a second interview, like during lunch. So I meet everybody. It goes pretty well. I skip 2 tables. I get in the car. My friend's been waiting in the parking lot for like 3 hours for me. He drove me from the airport to this thing. And my God, you're such a legend. Appreciate you. Let's get out of here. Thanks so much. And he said, did you meet everyone? And I said, everybody but 2. He said, well, get back in there. And so I
Whoa.
went in, and the last table, Zach, in other words, the first table for everybody else, was this guy, Carl, who worked for the school called Bridges Academy. And he said, we're a school that teaches twice exceptional students. I never heard that term.
Yeah.
It means students who are gifted and have learning disabilities. And I was like, oh, tell me more, and he's talking, and I feel
Go
like
on.
he's talking about me, and I'm like, oh my God. So I meet with him, and we do like the second interview, and he's like, I want you to come back to LA next week. And they fly me down. I tour the school, and there's these like exceptionally gifted, talented, quirky kids. And I was like, this is really magical. And they, pretty carte blanche to do what you want. So I was like, this is cool. So I did that. I worked there for 8 years, and then I really loved it. And I thought, during COVID, like many other people, I had this bubble, this like think bubble, light bulb.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is really cool for kids here in LA. But what if I did this for kids all over the world? What if we took kids together who are, yeah, right. What if we took kids together who are marooned? What about the kids in Connecticut or New Jersey or Arkansas or Switzerland, Sweden, Norway, right? What if we took those kids who might be the only kid like them in their zip code and gave them an hour a day to go full tilt boogie into their interests with a bunch of other quirky, smart kids, and then an adult who can say, like, you think that's cool? Check this out, right? Like that every day. I'm like, this will change lives. And so I left Bridges. My wife was like, I was in a doctoral program at the time for cognitive diversity. And my wife's like, you can pick 2 out of 3 things. You can start Young Scholars Academy, get your doctorate, or be married to me. So I was like, I'm going to drop out of the doctorate, and I'm going to stay with my wife, Katie, who's like my most amazing
Good
anchor.
pick, man. Good pick.
choice. Right? So it's not Dr. Sam, but Young Scholars Academy exists, and I have an incredible, amazing wife. So,
Hey, bad brother.
yeah.
Oh, that's funny. I also did not complete a PhD program for slightly different reasons, but it's a choose your own adventure. It's rarely like choose your own 3 adventures at once, it does come to that. So this isn't really a business development podcast, but maybe let me phrase it this way. How do you think you've grown the most starting this not just from the kid interaction, but from running a business, starting a business, you've scaled it, all of that. Give me some life lessons that you've picked up through your experience.
I mean, I think the biggest one's my wife, Katie. Like when I met her, she was just at another level. Like she was the #1 sales executive. She's part Korean, and so she's a woman and a minority. and she was the first female hire at a company and first minority in a sales company, and she led the division. So
Wow.
I met her, and just like most things in life, right? Humans are not that complex. I wanted to impress her. And so I started thinking bigger than I ever had because no one had asked me to, right? So like the kids, I rose to a higher occasion. I rose to the expectations. And Katie connected me with people who thought bigger, people who were industry changers, people who were, my now brother-in-law, and her best childhood friend, two people who are now my best friends, helped me think bigger, understand business systems. And I'll tell you the most interesting thing, which is the A word, authenticity. Like, we know when our kids are doing something, parents, you're listening right now, you might have a kid who will never turn in work ever because they don't care. They're too smart. They get that it's busy work, right? But that same kid will be at work on time because they get a paycheck, right? That matters. And the kid doesn't change. They just are too smart to do busy stuff. It was kind of like that for me. It's like, oh
Yeah.
my goodness, I'm going to start a virtual school. How do you do that? And I got to read all the books, right? And all of a sudden I'm reading a book a week, and
Wow.
I'm
Cool.
paying attention on webinars and taking crazy long notes because it's authentic, and I have to do it because this is like in the way of
Yes.
my goals, right?
Yes.
So I think that's a really important takeaway, is that, parents, if you have a kiddo and you're like, my kid has so much potential and they're struggling, the kids are complex, but I will say it's probably that they're struggling in areas where they're not very strong or interested. And if you can shift your attention, and instead of being like a judge, be a
Yeah.
detective, right? And get curious about where are they showing up, where are they strong, where are they thriving, and then delve more into that. Because when it gets authentic, and I'll give just a lightning quick example. I have a kid who I worked with for years when I used to do one-to-one executive function coaching, and I had like a one-to-one mentoring program. And I would say, Stephen, I cannot stand emails. They're the bane of my existence, but I respond to them because two things happen when I do. I maybe help people, and they maybe join our community. And I see the value in emails, even though I can't stand them. And then this kid never turned in his work, off the charts smart, got a job, a summer job. We checked in a weekend. I said, how's it going? So, I've been on time every day. I said, what changed? And he said, Mr. Sam, remember those emails? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, now I get paid. So I go on time. And I was like, wow,
Well, I think this speaks, man, to the strength based and having a reason. And, like, I haven't talked much about our side of the business, but we have a college admissions coaching company, and we're leaning more into the college prep now. But it's not the typical checking boxes. Like, my first interest in a session with a student is like, it takes a few sessions because I need to pry and pull. Like, I need to understand what we could get you fired up about. Because when you're fired up, you'll, like you said, I'll do anything. I'll do all these things that you're like, why did he ever do it? He didn't care. It wasn't worth it. Like, what's the impetus for him to? And I love that's kind of been your experience. And I think it's a great takeaway. And I think that not for everyone, but for a lot of students, entrepreneurship, starting a business, being involved with a big project, something so big. Like, when we come up with projects for our students, I got 3 metrics. It has to be something so big you never would have thought of it alone. You have to grow personally to accomplish it, and you're going to need mentors,
Mm.
right? And that's the level of big. And I love what you shared about with Katie. We both have Katie's, by the way.
Yeah,
So
I know.
that's another cool connection.
I asked Kate when I first met her. I was like, because my wife spells it Kady,
Ah,
which is
yeah.
really unique. And I asked Kate, I was like, is your full name? But no, I think that's such a good point, Zach. And I love those three ingredients, those three criteria. And I just think it's important to remember, again, that idea that like deficits don't really matter, right? Like, at the end of the day, there's a lot of attention brought to them. And yes, colleges look at these things, and if but really, if we can help our kids have more time in the space where they're strong. And what you just said, like, when you look at the stats, I'm going to butcher these, but it's something like 60% of entrepreneurs have ADHD or dyslexia, and
Yes,
40% of
dude.
CEOs, right?
Yeah.
And why? Because they've compensated. Why are these entrepreneurs? They don't like working for other people. They don't like authority. They don't like bureaucracy. So they leave and they create their own. And why are CEOs disproportionately dyslexic? Because they had to become gregarious to stand out in the class. They had to become charming. They had to compensate what they cannot do on paper, they would do with people. Right. And so then it shouldn't shock anyone. Your kid may not fit into a box. They're probably going to go make their own.
Yeah. And it's going to be a cool box. All right, man. Well, let's get into the part that I've been waiting for this whole time, which is, I love to ask the question, what do you see as the main problem of the education system, or some of the main problems? Obviously, we could talk about a lot, but just softball question for you, man. Like, no wrong answers. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think like, and I'm not certainly not the first person to say this, but I don't think, first of all, there's a lot of great, well-intended educators who
Sure.
are bound and stuck. It's easy to pick on educators. They're stuck in a system that's bigger than them,
Yeah.
and the change starts at the top. So I want to just always say, there are fantastic teachers out there. There are not, but there are fantastic teachers out there. Um, I think the issue is that the system hasn't kept up. It's 2 generations behind, right? We were really efficient in the get kids ready for factory work, Taylorism,
Yeah.
aggressive era, scientific management, right? Bell schedule, dunce cap if you're not paying attention, pale lunch, right? Rotate, stand in line, follow orders. We did such a good job. We
Dial that
won,
in, man.
dialed it in. World War I, World War II, Industrial Revolution, all of it.
Love it.
Fantastic. 5 gold stars. What we have not changed is that we don't live in an industrial, speaking for people in the United States, we don't live in an industrial era anymore, right? We live in an intellectual one. And I would go so far as to say, not my idea, Katie said this when I was on a podcast once and she corrected me. We live in maybe even a quandary era with AI, right? We're maybe 2 generations. We're either in an intellectual era or we're in a symbiotic AI era where it's not anymore about what you can do following orders. It's about what prompts can you come up with, what questions can you ask, how can you interface with the infinite ability of AI, and most importantly, what makes us human. How creative can you be? Schools, if you've seen the famous talk or read the famous book from the late Sir Ken Robinson, Schools Kill Creativity, schools are converging to the mean. People who are watching, you can see, people who are listening, I'm putting my fingers together. Schools are pushing everybody to be good at everything and the same.
Yeah.
And if you look at the logo, I always mix this up. Oh, I got it right. It's because it's the opposite, right? Our logos, it's 3 things. And I want to point that out for if you can't see it, everyone, our logo is a square peg in a round hole, right? So you have a square peg
Brilliant,
in a
man.
round hole. And the idea is, and the colors matter because Dr. Susan Baum, who I mentioned before, my mentor, when she wrote the book To Be Gifted and Learning Disabled, this is like in the 80s, she said, our kids are made up of 3 colors. Number 1, they have lagging struggle areas, which is the blue. That's why they have the blues, right? They're falling apart. They're not turning work in.
Yeah.
They're struggling. Then they have the yellow, which is their strength. And if you look, for those of you looking and those of you listening, I can tell you, it's the part that sticks out. It's the square edge.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the strengths that actually stick out the most. And we need to pay attention and cultivate them because most people's instinct is to round them out and chisel them off, which is the worst thing that you can do to a kid. Right. Why would you take someone who's a fantastic, gifted runner and sit them at a desk all day? Or why would you take an intellect who's a really creative poet and make them run all day? Right. Just for the sake of it. And the kid is green. That's the green because they're always a combination. They don't change. We see them in strength settings. We see them in struggle settings, but they are always a combination of both. And so to go back to that kind of like big picture question, where are our kids? Where's education? Where do we need to be? We need to be in a place that's taking a mentor approach, that's developing strengths, that's helping students think creatively, excuse me, because I don't need to know facts and figures anymore. ChatGPT can do that for me, right? And I use it 4 hours a day. So I know that ChatGPT or whatever AI is going to take over that knows the like basic stuff you learn in school. So we need to be teaching creative thinking, unconventional problem solving, product development, right? We need to be teaching like more poetry and thought experiments, the things that are fundamentally going to set us apart and help us lead meaningful, fulfilling lives, and do it in that yellow zone in our strength area where our kids are already strong, right? Not having everybody follow the bell schedule, put on a dunce cap if they don't pay attention, and do all the other things. So we're 2 generations behind, and we need to let go of what we think education looks like, and we need to have more autonomy, more choice, more mentoring, more small classes, because again, teachers have the deck stacked against them. What do you do with 45 kids in a class? It's impossible to do strength-based talent development when you have so many. Not impossible. I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of ways to do it, and I've done a lot of professional development around that, but it's not easy.
No, I love that you said that because my main impetus for leaving the classroom was I was like, I either need to, because I was trying to change, and I wanted to, and there's a lot you can get away with in your classroom, but it's a larger system. I was like, I either need to go into policy and politics, or I'm like, I need to sidestep it, maybe go private and then circle back an umbrella over, which I think is a similar approach to what you've taken. So I'm curious, man, do you see the Young Scholars Academy as part of the solution for education going forward?
I do, yeah. I think that we don't do grades. We don't do accreditation. We don't do a lot of the things that I think stand in the way of learning. And what we do is all the things I mentioned, I like to believe, right? So we have about 300 families who are going deeper than they could anywhere else
Yeah.
into their interest areas. Because again, like I have people that I hire just for SEO. I have people that I hire just for social media. I have people that I hire just for blogging. I don't care how good they are at the other things,
Yeah.
right? They make a living, a comfortable one at that, doing these unique things. So I want to ask my students, can we go so deep into the space? You may not work in this field, but you're going to feel really good about how good you get. And it's probably going to lead you into some other direction.
Where would you love to take? Obviously, there's going to be a lot of surprises along the way, but where do you see the work you're doing and maybe some of the partnerships you're making with others? Where do you see that expanding to over the next 5, 10, 15 even years, if you could imagine that far?
Yeah. I was at a networking event last night and I was talking to a lot of people and I met this one woman and she was talking about like an international connection. And I was like, I like you. And she's like, what? Why do you say that? I was like, you think bigger than everybody in this room. And, and I think that's the point. Like I say, I want to lead a strength-based revolution, right? Like my goal is that thousands of students go to Young Scholars Academy or some other place where they're developing their strengths and their talents. I want to shift the paradigm so that there's a community, right? That the parents are coming together and that they're exchanging resources. What I found, Zach, is that, and I know that you and Kate know this too, it's almost like a hub and wheel system where you're in the center and there's all these spokes coming out, all these parents you're talking to, and they're all struggling with the same stuff.
Yeah.
Different versions, different flavors, but they're going and they feel like they're alone and they feel like there's something wrong. And I feel like my goal is to like get rid of the hub and just connect everyone around the rim. So everybody can just be together. And so what the big vision for Young Scholars Academy is really threefold. One is that we grow the work that we're doing to thousands of families so they can all be a part of this really intimate experience that we call YSA, our virtual village. Number two is creating a parent community, which we're piloting this year.
Oh, cool.
A Facebook group, live synchronous virtual meetups, bi-weekly experts. We have like the leading experts come and talk to our families every other week. Dr. Dan Peters, Julie Skolnick, Debbie Reber, Debbie Steinberg-Kuntz, all these people, Seth Perler, all coming and talking to our families. And then the third part is having like an asynchronous element so that people can access courses and things they want to develop, but the times don't work out or they prefer to work alone.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we accommodate students who aren't necessarily looking for that social element as much. So that there's kind of this three-prong approach. Like I see it as like kind of three branches. One is like the live synchronous deep learning with mentoring and socializing, the parent community, so parents can kind of come together and get expert advice and almost like parent university kind of, but retraining their brains to learn what we know is right for our kids, not all the harmful stuff out there. And then number three, having this kind of self-paced trajectory for kids who want to go it on their own pace and study alone.
Well, I love what you're saying, man. And you opened up with this phrase of like a virtual village. And like we've talked before, man, I'm all about it takes a village. And our Kate and my goal, although we're helping kids get into universities, the bigger goal is the same kind of stuff you're talking about. And like what we want to do is affect the culture of education, like in the hearts, in the minds, skip a couple of those gaps. So I guess like my only question to you, brother, is why are you saying thousands and not millions? There are hundreds of millions of people in this country.
You're right. I need to take
think
my own
you
advice and think bigger. You're right.
You gotta crank it up, man.
Yeah.
And the reason I say this, and it's, we're just joking with each other, but I think that this relates to the conversation, is when you take an interest and all of a sudden you put it at a like 10 or 100x level, you start coming up with solutions that are very different. And I feel it helps us accelerate. Like Kate and I have a goal of growing, not for the money's sake, but to 125 million. And so I'm thinking very differently about how I'm growing this than the average person. I'm working with my son on helping him become a video editor at 13. But when it's just edit this video, it's one thing. When I'm like, well, how would you build it up so that you could go work for your favorite YouTube artist and be prepared for that? He's like, oh, I'd actually have to prepare. Like, I got to do more. I got to learn. I got to do, so I love the scale of things. And I love everything that you're bringing to the table, brother. It's a really cool conversation. And I think the last like detail I want to hone in with you on is the virtual part. We're kind of in two different spectrums. I taught virtually for a long time. Right now, Kate and I are hyper local. Like we want to affect the educational culture of the families in Darien, Greenwich, Norwalk, like all these areas, Stamford in Connecticut, where we're based currently. And that's very different for me. And you could do things when you're local. Talk to me about the virtual space, man, because there's huge strengths to it. There's obviously some weaknesses. What's your thinking around applying what you're doing virtually?
Now, as you can imagine, I get this a lot, right? Because I'll meet people, and I can picture this summer I did. I don't know why I did this to myself, Zach, but I spoke at 10 conferences in 21 days. And so I was, yeah, it was a lot. I got COVID at the end. It was a lot,
I
but
bet you did.
yeah, I certainly did. It was a sprint, but when I meet people and they read about Young Scholars Academy and they see it, and they're like, oh, but it's virtual and it's polarizing. Some people go, heck yes, and they step closer, and other people go, no, thank you.
Yeah,
And why virtual? Two primary reasons come to mind. Number one is that the mission is bringing together a virtual community because our kids are often marooned, right? These kids are stranded. They might feel like the only version of themselves where they live, and they may not have that in their zip code. Again, I left a school in Los Angeles that had 220 kids that were all similar. That already exists. So
yeah,
what can I do that's different? I can reach everyone else,
yeah,
right? And there's a lot of hyper local things, and that's great. I fully support that. But when you talk about thinking 10, 100x bigger, I want to build an international revolution, right? We have a kid, Zach, and I use him. You know how like your parents would be like, I walked uphill both ways. We have this kid, he's in Switzerland. He takes our classes at 1 a.m. He's
oh wow,
taking AP calculus and Minecraft like at 1 a.m. And when you think about why is this kid up at the middle of the night for a 75-minute class, it's because he can't find anything like this in his whole country.
wow,
So that's reason number one. It's that our kids are often struggling where they are and they can't find what we're offering. Because what do people do? They hear about us and they go, I wish there was something like you near us. And I say,
yeah.
there is, right? It's us, right? And that's the idea. We're near everybody, right? So number one, that. Number two, a lot of our kids are struggling because they have a hard time with different sensory input and stimuli, right? You're taking a student who's, let's say, autistic, they have a hard time going out into the world. At
Yeah.
home, you can control 99% of the things. The only thing changing is Zach on my screen. And it's a lovely view, by the way. So everything,
Thanks for noticing.
everything is controlled, right? It's like an experiment. So for a lot of our kids, it's actually quite helpful.
Wow. What a good response, man. And you've automatically got me thinking bigger now, which I appreciate too. Um, One of our goals ultimately, we've been looking at castles in Italy, and we would love to set up like a Professor X type Castle University, kind of like what the Cabal does, but for good, and like bring together brilliant minds as a place and a center so that they can plot and plan and coordinate. Because what excites me the most is not what we're helping kids do now, but what we're going to be able to help them do all together in like 10, 15 years, right? When
Yeah.
they're in more positions of influence. Like I feel like I've wanted to be in my 40s since I was 4 years old. I have autonomy, I have funds, I can do what I want. Like I've been waiting for this for so long. So I'm excited for these kids to get to that point and what we could do. Because now we're talking truly changing life on this planet, right? And I think that we're at this evolutionary period where it's possible. And brother, like the work you're doing and the soul connection we get to have and the conversations, like I'm like, man, I love what I'm doing, but I want to come hang out in your classroom. Like these are great. So I just want to plug to parents again, like, although the goal of this, hopefully you came away inspired. One of the things I want to encourage families is like, go check out Young Scholars Academy. If you're wondering, would this be good for my kid? Chances are it might be, right? Like, is there a cutoff where if a family's like, I think this would be really great, and you're like, you don't have a 160 EQ, get out of here?
Oh, yeah, that's a very good
What's
question.
your
And,
kind of
and
inclusivity
yeah,
vibes there?
and I want to say two things. One, you said the Professor Xavier thing, and by the way, Professor Xavier's school is called like School for the Gifted Youngsters. And I did a TEDx talk last year, and basically like the whole punchline of my TEDx talk was, I'm trying to be Professor Xavier. right? What did Professor Xavier had two jobs, right? He helped young quote unquote mutants develop their strengths, and he protected them from being bullied outside, right? That was his job: talent development and a safe space. And that was my whole entire punchline.
Wow,
So
brother. I
so we're
love it.
on the same page. As far as, cutoffs and so forth, we don't require any kind of formal neurocognitive neuro assessments. What we say is, if you have a kid who is really asynchronous, who's really bright, creative, showing up in different ways, and also maybe struggling, then check us out. We do like a 100% satisfaction guarantee. It's working for hundreds of families. You come check us out. If you don't love the class after the first class, you just email me and we just stop the payments. Right. So it's really easy. And again, I didn't even come to plug Young Scholars Academy. I feel fortunate, Zach, that we spent a lot of time talking
I
about
brought you on so I can plug it, bro.
I appreciate it. My biggest takeaway, what I want families to leave with, is no one cares about your deficits. So focus on your kid's strengths, right? Help your kid live a strength-based life. You're going to be more proud of them. You're going to be able to brag about them. They're going to be more proud of themselves. They're going to feel better, because at the end of the day, deficits only matter in school, and school is such a small period of your life. Focus on the strengths. They're bigger than school. They're bigger than anything that you might be thinking about right now. And that's where your kid's going to show up. That's what, and nobody, and I'm going to end on my favorite quote if I can. I won't end, but I want to end this section here. Dr. Renzulli, who mentored Susan Baum. So we're talking like two mentors up on the mentor scale.
Yeah, bro.
Dr. Renzulli said, and this is the quote that made me drop out of grad school and quit my job and start this: "No one cares about Einstein's ability to paint or Picasso's ability to do math." He said, "No one cares about Einstein's ability to paint or Picasso's ability to do math. So why are we obsessed with everybody doing the same thing at the same level?" And I was just like, oh, all right. Let's start focusing on getting kids really good, feeling really positive, and focusing on the things they love.
Let's end on that note, man. Like you and me, we could just rap for hours, but we got long lives to do amazing work. So families, go check out youngscholarsacademy.org. Please support what he's doing. Be one of the millions of families working with this man. So when we buy this castle, we can invite bro to actually step in, and we can all keep doing amazing things together. Brother, I truly believe in my heart that you're a gift to the world. So thank you for the strengths you're focusing on. Thanks for coming on the show today, brother. I truly appreciate it, man.
Thank you, Zach, and thanks for the work you and Kate are doing, helping kids really tap into their strengths and broadcast them to schools so that they can get the opportunities that they deserve. Because a lot of students might have spotty transcripts, they might have had a tough go of it in the past, and the work that you're doing is helping people to lead to their best foot forward and then catapult them exponentially to the altitude, right, that they're meant to soar at.
Sales pitch delivered. All right. Families, please do me a favor. If you like what you heard today, please like, subscribe, share it with a friend. If you know somebody, a parent or an educator or someone inspiring that you think would be a good guest on the show, please let me know. Families, thank you again for tuning in. Go out, do something amazing. See you next time.